You're listening to Lips LA with Scott Lips.
Hey guys, welcome to the show. It's Scott Lips, and this is Lip Service. On today's show, we have Mr. Alex Ebert, the American singer-songwriter, best known, and you know him as a singer of Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. It's the same guy. Alex is the singer of Edward Sharpe. I'm a Robot. He's also a film scorer. He actually won a Golden Globe 2014. We have a great conversation. Excited to bring it to you today. If you like the show, make sure you download the show. Make sure you tell a friend. Tell 5 friends. Tell 20 friends. It doesn't matter. Just make sure you rate and review the show. It's very, very helpful for us to spread the word. Coming up in just a moment, Mr. Alex Ebert from Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros.
You're listening to Lips LA with Scott Lips.
Hey guys, welcome to the show. It is Scott Lips, and I'm joined with the one and only Alex Ebert. I want to make sure I say that right because I know.
If we were in New Orleans, that would be perfect.
Okay. How's the correct pronunciation? Let's see.
It's just, well.
Ebert, right?
It's I want it to be Ebert, but it's generally Ebert.
Ebert, okay.
Yeah, but when I'm in New Orleans, people are like, oh, Alex Ebert. I'm like, wow, that sounds so mellifluous.
It sounds almost French the way you say it.
Yeah.
Hey man, so you're best known obviously for all the Edward Sharpe stuff. It's a persona you created, but you've done so much in your life, and your story is pretty fascinating. I want to get into all that stuff. You have a new solo record. We're going to get into that too. And basically, take us back to the beginning. I mean, I know your father was a therapist, I believe, right? And you were born in L.A.
Yeah, my dad was a therapist. He's still alive, but retired. He was the kind of therapist that does, it's called what's it called? Psychodrama. Psychodrama? Jesus. Anyway, yeah, I think that's what it's called. Where essentially he role plays and he pretends he's your father or he's your uncle or whoever you're upset at. And he's like, what do you want to tell me? And then, people are screaming at him. So when I was a kid, he had the office upstairs, and I just hear all these muffles like, fuck you, and he'd absorb all this sort of energy and then come down all charged up. It was pretty wild.
And also did pretty untraditional things like he'd be naked everywhere.
Always
and
naked. I recently asked him why he was always naked, and he's like, because I was afraid to be naked. I was like, wow, that's deep.
And your mom was an actress.
Yeah.
And so you grew up in a pretty colorful background. I mean, did you feel like there was almost like a hippie type mentality to them growing up because it was pretty untraditional and I guess needless to say it was definitely not of the norm, right? So
yeah, there was definitely I was aware of that my parents were super eccentric.
Yeah.
My friends would comment on it.
What were some of the weird things that your dad would do growing up? I mean, it was sort of.
He would answer the door naked.
Right. Which is what
without knowing who was there.
Right.
But the front door.
The postman would arrive and he would just be there. Yeah. That's always a bit weird.
Yeah. Standing on his head, yodeling. Crying at bizarre moments, shivering and doing this thing where he gets married to the horizon, as I used to call it. He was hyper embarrassing. The most embarrassing thing he would do, though, we'd go to restaurants. Inevitably, he always wanted to switch tables, which always drove me crazy.
While you were eating?
No, just before. We'd get there and he'd be like, excuse me, can we? And I'd be like, oh. But then the thing he would do is before he'd sit down, he'd go into these really overt, sort of almost yogic stretches in front of...
In the restaurant?
In the restaurant.
Right, which is always normal.
The kind of stretches where you make noise on your way back up, where you're like, oh, and shake it all out. It was just a constant.
So you must have been this is sort of the norm of growing up. Everyone's, parents.
No, I was petrified. I didn't think it was normal at all. No.
And at some point, your dad actually took you to the desert and was chanting.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And there's that film of that. Yeah.
And that sort of led to actually one of your songs later on in life, right? So. Yeah, so as growing up as a kid, who were your heroes in terms of musically? I know you were exposed to a lot. I know that hip hop is a big influence of yours. But did you have heroes musically that your parents were sort of playing? I don't know what kind of music they were into growing up.
I had 3 heroes, I guess, that my dad introduced me to before I discovered hip hop. The first was Pavarotti, who I called Pavotti, and I had a Buddha, a statue of Buddha. I thought it was Pavarotti. Okay. He had a big belly and his arms were up. And then the other was Vangelis and Chariots of Fire. And then the other was a combination of all the highwaymen, Willie Nelson and
Johnny Cash
and Waylon Jennings and Chris Christopherson, that crew.
At some point, hip-hop came into the picture for you,
And then when I was 7, I discovered Run DMC.
Right.
Yeah.
It's kind of a really cool mix of Run DMC, Johnny Cash,
Yeah.
and these ethereal figures, right?
Yeah,
So that obviously leads us to where your musical journey began. And did you start did you know from a young age you were going to be a musician? Was that sort of something that some people know from a very young age, that's sort of their path and journey in life?
As soon as I found hip hop, yes. As soon as I found Run DMC, I started writing raps.
That's amazing.
I remember even my first rap. I knew the show 21 Jump Street. I didn't know what it meant, but I saw it around, and it looked cool. So the first rap was, I've literally never told any. I don't think I've ever told anyone this rap. I was walking down the street at a 21 beat, going to the market to get some meat. It goes on from there.
It was like a bacon run.
Very
very
basic sort of the rudiments of life.
Yeah. So your first rap was actually bacon inspired, which is awesome. And obviously cinema played a big role in who you became, and you went on to score a lot of stuff. You actually got nominated for a Golden Globe, and you've done a ton in the film world. So where did that love of film come in? Were there movies too that your parents were watching that you were really inspired by?
You know what it was? In part because of Vangelis, actually, because my dad was so into playing Vangelis, and because he was also so into taking us on these road trips, and the road trips were always through like Southwest super hyper cinematic country, and he'd be blasting like Vangelis while we're passing this Martian landscape in like Taos or wherever we're, Canyon de Chelly, and I would be looking out the window, and I would just, I understood the power of like visual mixed with audio, and just passing these landscapes, and my mind would just unfurl. And then he would also. It's funny because my mom was the actress, but really he was the one that would be like, "Hey, Mikey, that's my middle name. Mikey, come here. I'm going to show you this movie, or I'm going to show you that thing." And he'd always.
Are you from the East Coast?
No, but he had that sort of like Mikey, he had.
Because I'm from New York. It sounded like you were like, "Yo,
from,
Mikey, what's up?"
He was from They met in New York.
Okay.
So I would get exposed to all that stuff. Usually like. A lot of Morricone stuff, a lot of stuff with great score, Good, the Bad, the Ugly, stuff he was introducing me to. A lot of buddy stuff, like Western stuff that he was into,
So you had an amazing upbringing culturally, and obviously in college you ended up writing a few screenplays, right?
Yeah.
And you started really getting into the film aspect of things.
Yeah.
Did you think you were going to go more into film when you were in college?
Yes.
Or did you really? Okay.
In fact, I went to school for college. The only thing that saved me in my mom's eyes and prevented my father from sending me to trade school when I was 13 or 14 is that I came home and I said, Mom, have you ever heard of Charlie Chaplin? And she told my dad, she's like, he likes Charlie Chaplin. He's going to be fine. Because, that was her opinion. Yeah. So she immediately enrolled me in these extracurricular filmmaking classes starting at age 15. So I started making these short movies. I got into Emerson because of my grades where I hated school.
Yeah, I did too.
But I got to Emerson, then I wrote a screenplay and dropped out.
And did any of that stuff see the light of day, like screenplay-wise?
No, I've written like 7 at this point, but music ended up just taking over.
Yeah, as it normally does when you have that itch, right? So did you meet your first guys in college that you started playing with? Were you writing songs sort of parallel when you were doing all the film stuff?
So the first member in like what eventually became I'm a Robot, and the first member in eventually what became Edward Sharpe were both Christian Letts, who I knew since I was 3 years old, and we went to elementary school together. So there was that.
Because your first band was actually called Lucky 13, right?
Or
there was like a rap band before that.
There was a few rap bands before that, but the first iteration of I'm a Robot was 13's Lucky. And Christian was in that. But as I like to say, we lost Christian to swing dancing. I don't know if you remember like when swing dancing took over for a second, around the movie Swingers.
Oh yeah, I love that movie.
But
there was that place in Los Feliz actually that. What was that place? You might know that place.
Oh, yeah.
Brian?
The Derby.
The Derby, right.
Yeah,
that was like a big...
That was a whole thing.
Wasn't that like I never went there, but I heard that was like
a whole scene, man.
Yeah.
It was such a scene that we literally, like, he started talking different. He got tattoos that were like, what's the paler, sailor? Like, just all these, like, 40s. And we just, like, lost him. He married a swing person. And I was just, eventually, I was like,
a swing
you have your world
instructor or something?
Yes, he became an instructor. He became, he was the world champion at the Lindy Hop. Like, he took it really seriously. Ironically, Edward Sharpe's drummer was also world champion, but at, like, the whatever, I can't remember the names of these dances.
So you have this unspoken swing connection that you didn't even know.
Swing hatred. I keep losing all my friends to swing.
That movie is actually one of my favorite movies. The whole,
Yeah,
I don't know
good.
how much, but the whole thing when he calls that girl and he leaves like 9 messages on her machine and she's like, don't ever call me
I was in the shower.
Don't ever call me again.
That's classic.
So, all right. So the first band was actually this Lucky 13 iteration. Like,
Yeah.
where did that come from? Like, what? Because obviously the rap stuff.
Yeah.
You dabbled in the rap
I
stuff.
dabbled in rap, and then by the time I was 17, like late 90s, the rap stuff, I was like, I got disenchanted with all the bling, and it lost its storytelling creativeness to me.
Yeah. Because
So
you
I
were into Run DMC, but who else were you into?
My golden era was like 93 West Coast and East Coast.
So
like
Tupac and all that
Native
stuff.
Tongues and then the whole West Coast, like, fuck, who, Jesus Christ, what's the crew that was up in the Bay?
Well, yeah, Tupac, yeah, Biggie, you had...
No, Souls of Mischief, and then
Oh, right,
Farside,
okay.
like the
Oh,
kind of
right,
creative, kind of
okay.
backpack
Yeah,
hip hop,
yeah.
like golden
like
era.
almost mystic hip hop.
Yeah, the mystic,
Farside.
that Farside album, for instance, is like my top
Cool.
3 albums of all time.
Yeah.
So anyway, that era left,
I'll call it like eclectic
Yeah,
hip-hop
eclectic
almost, yeah.
hip hop, and was having this amazing reign. But anyway, so then I left music and was like, what kind of music am I going to sort of listen to? So I was like, I'll try like Bob Marley. Like, who are these like people? Like David Bowie? Who are these people I missed?
Yeah.
While my head was just completely up hip hop's ass. And then I started thinking, well, maybe I'll try a melody while rapping. So I dropped out of college. I was on a ton of drugs, and it's actually really hard to make a movie when you're on a lot of drugs. It's hard. It's too collaborative. I made one, but then I just it just unraveled. But you can do that with music.
Sometimes the drugs help the music, but
Yeah,
sometimes they
you
don't.
can get away with it on music.
Yeah.
So I bought a beat machine, and I just started making. The first thing I sampled was, I wish I still had this tape. It was this scene in True Romance, and I just sampled it, turned it into this beat. It was called Alabama, because I was just so in love with Alabama Whirly. And then I just started singing. The first thing I really sang on made me sob. It was so bad, but I just kept going, and then it became this like 13's Lucky, I'm a Robot hybrid, or predecessor thing.
Did that band eventually become I'm a Robot?
Yeah, it became
Okay.
I'm a Robot. Tim Anderson came in, and initially I'm a Robot was like almost exclusively hip hop based.
It's funny because it is like electro, punk, whatever.
Yeah, and then it turned into just like punk, rock, or like whatever the hell I'm a Robot was.
Were you into punk at an early age? Like what bands were you into?
No, I got into punk late. Punk supplanted my love for hip hop. Eventually, hip hop was my punk rock, and then I found punk rock, and I was like, oh shit, this is dope too. Like this has that same energy for me.
Have you ever seen Decline of the Western Civilization?
Yeah.
Such a great movie. That whole era was so great.
Yeah.
So you got into that stuff, and then eventually you guys get a deal with Virgin, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did that come about? That whole
Big
process?
ass deal. So we had this manager named Missy Worth that we like hired on for a second, and she came in, and she's this like, she has this reputation for being harsh. Anyway, she came in. I'm not going to talk, but like she came in and she looked at us all and she goes, "If you guys want to take it up to the big leagues, you need to take it up 18 notches." And I was like, 18 fucking,
what does that even
fuck
mean?
you, 18 notches. What the fuck is 18 notches? And I went home, and that day and the next day I wrote, here's a story for the kid, Dynamite and Alive, the 2 songs that basically kind of got us totally out of spite. And I've had people like hippie friends that are like, right, like you never like, you don't create like out of sense of competition or spite, right? I'm like, are you crazy? Like half my creations are out of spite.
Yeah.
Like
That's where some of the best music comes from.
Yeah, man.
The anger and the infighting with the bands and whatnot.
Yeah.
Definitely. And Creeps Me Out is probably my favorite track.
Oh, cool.
We're going to go through your whole musical history here. We'll be back in 1 second, and we'll get into the rest of it. Thanks, guys.
You're listening to Lips LA with Scott Lips.
Hey guys, so we are back. I want to kind of jump to, a lot of people know you, obviously you're sort of synonymous with Edward Sharpe, and you created that persona. How did that come about? Obviously, I know it's a character you created. I know that sort of, people know you for that band. You've done so much in your life, but tell us how, like, leading up to that. I'm a Robot disbanded after a couple albums,
Yeah,
right?
man. So
Had the big record deal.
I got the big record deal. We did the thing, but then I got kind of cowed into this process where suddenly I was writing. I felt like I was just writing songs with radio in mind and writing songs with other people in mind and
Instead
to
of
please
for
the
yourself.
label instead of for myself.
Yeah.
And I started to lose my sense of what brought me joy with music. So I literally was at like an almost suicidal depression at that point. So I was sort of desperate, and I thought back to like, when was the last time I felt totally pure with music? And I went back and back and back, and I arrived with Christian Letts and me
Your swing
in
friend.
elementary, my swing friend, pre-swing,
Yeah.
in elementary school when we had this music classes every day at this tiny little hippie elementary school in the valley called CCS, and this woman Ruth would play an acoustic guitar, and all the kids would sing in unison, sing out of key, and bang on tambourines. I was like, there's something about that I need to re-explore, just completely removed from the business and from the professionalism. And so I started writing songs that were more like sing-alongs, that like, and having this idea of like totally unprofessionalizing professionalism where anyone could be in the band, and it would just be this sort of more social family movement thing that really didn't have some threshold of sort of professional occupancy, but was just like this
Well, sort of how those sing-alongs were.
ragtag-
Yeah, the
just
sing-alongs
like,
were like out of time,
just a mess,
out of key.
exactly.
Right.
And that's what I wanted it to be. It was just like this jubilant mess.
Yeah.
And get back to the essence of what music was about. So I started writing that kind of shit. And the reason why, in so many ways, doing Edward Sharpe was more of like a return to my 5-year-old self. But at that point, who Alex Ebert was, like, I had just lost the plot
Yeah.
for myself. So in some ways, taking on another name allowed me to sort of have a tabula rasa, blank slate, where I was able to just be like, okay, I'm back. Whatever I am, like, this is me.
It's interesting because you almost started a movement there with Mumford and Sons and
Mhm.
the Lumineers and all these artists. Dare I say, you guys were definitely one of the first
Mhm.
to really. I mean, how do you feel about that in terms of creating that folk thing is so big now, and you definitely were one of the pioneers of
Yeah.
that alt country,
Yeah.
that folk thing that came about and is so huge now. Do you feel good about that? Do you feel like
I feel on the
you know-
whole, I feel good about it because I think that I like the vibe of it. It's
Yeah.
cool. Like, campfire shit is great. And earnestness. Well, that's the thing I'm most proud of. I feel like we helped bring back earnestness. Earnestness was something that I think was completely illegal in rock and roll for a long time. I remember feeling like I couldn't smile on stage. Like, if I was earnest, it was just lame as fuck. It was
Mhm.
all about sort of leather jackets and, and snarls. And I realized the most punk rock thing I could do then was do the most unhip thing I could do, which was be earnest.
Yeah.
And I think now it's sort of, to sing an earnest love song or to speak unironically about something, about love or something, is like now okay. And I think that that's something that I'm happy about.
And at some point, you guys had like 14 members in the band, right?
Oh yeah.
And there was this great thing I heard that you guys would go to different cities and perform, and it was all this kind of celebration. You'd invite people on stage.
Yeah.
There was like a fiddler that came on stage. You guys ended up taking him on the road for a week.
That's right.
Which is
yes.
I don't think that's ever really happened before.
Right.
I don't know about bands just taking audience
just
members
absorbing
and come on in the band
the
for a
public.
week. Yeah. And how did that? Was that something you would do frequently? Was that something? It's pretty,
that was sort of the ethos. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was the general vibe. At a certain point, the bus only holds so many, so you end up like, you have your capacity. But that was definitely the vibe. And yeah, musicianship sort of took a back seat to like happenstance, and
Yeah.
that was fun.
I feel like, I don't know, because I like touring, but I don't know if you know that I play too. I play with Courtney Love and her band.
Oh yeah.
But for me, it was hard to sleep. I never really toured that much, and I slept in that little, like, I don't know, it's almost like a coffin,
Yeah,
and you're
yeah.
trying to sleep, and your head is hitting
Yeah.
the back of the bus, and you're going over these bumps, and it's impossible to get a good night's sleep. Do you like the touring life?
No, I
Obviously,
hate it.
yeah. So that communal thing,
Fucking hate it.
but that connection with your fans is obviously
it's the best.
Yeah, that 1 hour on stage.
The 1 hour is amazing.
Is amazing. But the other 23 hours you're sitting around
I know.
besides sleeping, and you're like, what
I
do I
know.
do? So what would you fill your days with? I would just actually take a tour bus and like explore the city on those like weird double-decker tours
Yeah.
because I had nothing to do. But
It's funny. You think like, I mean, I made a solo album while I was on tour. I
Cool.
tried to fill up my day. But if you're not really, really aggressive about trying to create some variety, it's amazing what kind of lethargy
yeah.
being on a bus will inspire in you or uninspire in you. Yeah, it can get sort of depressing. Yet the other day we did this Grammy Museum thing, and it was amazing.
Oh, that's right. You did that last night or the night before?
Last night. Yeah. And it was amazing. And then we go back. They're like, "Here's the green room," and I go in the green room and I see the sandwiches. And and I start getting these flashbacks of tour. I'm just like, the
Spinal Tap sandwiches.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was like, oh no,
the bread doesn't fit.
Forgot about this.
The cold cuts. Right. Amazing.
Yeah.
So would you fill your days with writing songs on the bus? Would you explore the city? Like what was your kind of because you kind of were like a big, huge family, right?
Yeah. No, what we did is we all brought bicycles.
Okay.
And we would go on like bicycle rides, and it was that was my favorite pastime for sure. It was all of our favorite. After every show, we would go on these. We called it night riding, and we'd go on these like 1 hour, 2 hour explorations. Yeah, it was super fun.
What was your favorite city from being on the road? Because obviously the touring part's grueling, but obviously New Orleans is something that
New Orleans takes the cake.
Right,
New Orleans takes the cake. But there was cities that I didn't know, like Milwaukee. How much I love Milwaukee, or just these cities where you're like, oh. The city's incredible.
Did I hear a great quote that you said, or you quoted someone saying there's New York, San Francisco, and...
there's New York, San Francisco, and New Orleans. Everything else is
in between or something, or
is whatever. It wasn't Milwaukee, but it's something else.
Something like that. Yeah, that's kind of how you felt on the road.
Yeah, that's how I felt. Yeah, well, it's funny because the more that everything gets homogenized, like you're just going from one P.F. Chang to the next. You don't even see what else is happening.
And what's life like for you now in New Orleans? I mean, because you're writing all this new music and you're scoring, you have your solo record and stuff, but. Versus LA, because you grew up here,
I know.
Right? So what's the sort of the different,
I mean, like we were talking about earlier, it's like LA has this, like I realize it because I grew up here, whatever it is, I feel like I know at least 10,000 people here or something, and I just run into people and they're all good friends. In New Orleans, it's like me and the city, and I love that because New Orleans to me is like, my good friend Jenna, if you're listening, she describes like a lot of places are the birthplace of this or the birthplace of that. New Orleans actually feels like a mother.
Yeah.
Like it's like wet and like birthing like stuff all the time. And there's something about that environment that's perfect for the creative process for me.
And an amazing energy, not unlike New York, where you have just that energy in the streets, that kinetic energy.
Yeah.
We were talking about our friend Sidney Torres, who, if you're listening to, who's the soon-to-be mayor.
What's up, Sidney?
We're
rooting for you.
Yeah. So daily life there is just, you have a studio there, right? This is where you created the new album, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, you're also synonymous for a home, which has inspired so many great things for you, weddings, anniversaries. It's been there's a storytelling process to that song that's probably inspired people, saved lives, and you have to feel great about that, I would imagine, right? So tell me what that song means to you. A lot of people end up sort of resenting the fact when they have this song
man, you just gave me chills.
Yeah.
It's true. Like that song, people have come up and bluntly told me like, that song saved my life.
Yeah, amazing.
I met this person, it changed my life. It did this, and we got married to it. And all of those things completely temper any whatever that the thing about that song that's kept it fresh for me is every time we perform it, instead of me telling a story, when I tell the story of me and Jade meeting,
Jay was in your band, and you guys dated for a while, I guess, and then
that story of like her falling on her ass that I tell in the middle of the song is totally true. But instead of doing that,
what did happen in that? Because I obviously know
she was in my apartment.
She fell out of a window,
and
something.
I look over. All I hear is ah. And like I look over and she's not in the window anymore.
Were you up on the 5th floor, or where
we were? Just on the 2nd floor.
Okay, all right.
And she had fallen into a bush of bougainvillea.
Okay.
But I jumped out, found her on the in this bush, and we took her to the hospital. She kept going, my leg, it's my leg. And he's like, the doctor's looking at the leg and her leg, and she's like, no, the ligament. She has a hilarious sense of humor in that moment. But no, instead of that, we hand the microphone to the audience, and I ask anybody if they have stories to tell. And the most heartfelt, beautiful experiences of our live show are almost inevitably the stories that the audience will tell.
Any ones that sort of, stay true to you that you bring out in your head, like
yes.
Yeah.
God rest Hayden DeRoberts. Hayden DeRoberts. We were playing. It was like 2011, Bonnaroo, and I was collecting stories from 60,000 people.
Wow.
Like it was a huge audience.
Amazing.
And much to everybody's chagrin, Like, the stories were terrible, but I was also determined to get a good one. So I'm spending like 15 minutes in the audience just collecting horrible, useless...
During the song? Or this,
yeah,
this
during
is like
the
while
song.
the song is playing?
Yeah,
Okay.
they're like playing, and I'm collecting just, turn your cell phones off! Just really bad stories that are non-stories.
Right.
And finally, on the 6th attempt, I hand the microphone to this kid. Tan kid, looks like, cheeky kid. And he takes the mic. He's like, I don't know if you remember, but about a year and a half ago, I was in the hospital, and you guys came to visit, and you played me some songs, and that day, I got a bone marrow transplant that saved my life.
Oh, my God.
And here he was, and we all remembered this kid, but he looked completely different back then. He was gaunt, like a wisp of a man, and here he was in the sunshine and doing his thing, so we bring him on stage. It was just one of those, like, Forrest, like that Forrest Gump moment in the middle of 60,000 people. We find this kid.
Then did he join the band too?
I wish he joined the band, man. And he ended up passing.
Oh,
he
my
got
God.
sick and passed. But it was
Sorry.
one of those. It was one of those beautiful moments. He inspired us so much. Like we really kept track of him and kept track of like what he was doing and how he was trying to help kids and inspire people. And we've met so many inspiring people because of that storytelling process.
So you actually embraced that song, which is great. It's a great thing. So, and Heath Ledger actually kind of helped sort of fund the band, right? How'd you guys meet him? How'd that even happen?
So Heath was a part of this crew called the Masses, this art collective called the Masses, and he was out here a bunch. I got to know him a little bit when I was doing I'm a Robot, but then with Edward Sharpe, I wanted to put it out, and he wanted to start a record label, and he heard the stuff. And we started hanging out, and he's like, "Okay, this is great." He actually wanted me to put out the demos. He's like, "Don't record the album, just put these out," And I almost listened to him, but and
it's true that the sort of essence of who that band is, you don't want it to produce, right?
Yeah.
The idea was to really have like the unproduced album and have it not slick as opposed to like all the heavy production that goes on these days. You wanted almost the demo qualities out there, right? So
thankfully, when we did record it, none of us really knew what we were doing, and we recorded it all to tape, so it maintained a garagey quality, which is actually one of my favorite parts about that album. But yeah, Heath really, really, really inspired me because the day, basically starting on the moment I met him, he squeezed the space between like inspiration and actualization. Like he'd be like, "I have an idea, let's go do it." And it reminded me of me when I was younger. And after he died, his voice and his presence stayed with me so palpably. It would literally tell me what, like I bought the bus with like his guidance.
Amazing.
I decided to start a label myself with his like everything was like in the spirit of Heath. Yeah.
You guys had a deeper connection.
Yeah.
And so now when you're writing music, the band is sort of on a hiatus for now, would you say?
We're going to make another album this year.
Amazing.
Yeah.
How do you decide which tracks are for your solo venture? Because obviously genre-wise, you've had the, I'm a Robot was more sort of in the electronic punks, and then your new stuff has a bit of hip hop in it.
Yeah.
It's got a heavy sort of electro side to it too. So are you sort of consciously deciding these tracks are for my solo project, this is for Edward Sharpe? I mean, how do you decide?
I think I finally figured it out. And I think what it is if it's like personal, emotional stuff, like if I'm getting emo, that's for me. Okay. I'm not going to subject my band to representing my own personal emotions. Yeah. But if it's about like sort of a communalized emotion, then that's for Edward Sharpe.
Cool. Yeah. And obviously scoring is something that you love to do too,
I love
right?
It, yeah.
So All Is Lost won a Golden Globe. Yeah. Pretty amazing. So how much of your time too are you spending doing that stuff too? It's sort of like divided between
I'd like to spend more time doing it. It's one of the greatest things musically ever in a way, because as you know, songs, no matter how much you think you're experimenting, you end up following the like verse chorus format, which is cool. But sometimes, what if a chorus doesn't want to come back?
Yeah.
And in scoring, you get to do that, where you're only serving the purpose, the necessity. And I love that, like really just serving music as a necessity as opposed to like a requirement.
Any plans to do more scoring coming up stuff?
No plans, but
it always comes up,
like Henry Mancini said, I'm waiting by the phone.
Right.
Yeah.
So the new album, Alex, is sort of it's a double album, right? You've been dropping music, you've been dropping singles. I think the state of music these days is an interesting one, right? The conventional idea of an album almost doesn't really need to exist anymore. So you've definitely been following the untraditional path and just single. I think you dropped, 3 or 4 singles last year?
Yeah.
And now the new record. And I think it's a double record also.
The second half comes out later. We're going to drop that on a whim.
Yeah.
sometime
So
later.
how has the music business changed for you in terms of like the way that you're approaching releasing music? Obviously, technology. Like, where do you see it? Because years ago, you just had to release a record, right?
It's an interesting conversation, man.
It
because
is.
theoretically everything you're saying is 100%,
Yeah.
but the business and people's mindset is still stuck in the idea of like a product.
Yeah.
And the excitement around like a collection. So, still to these days, like radio won't really look at something unless they're like, well, where's the album?
Right.
And
Honestly,
then-
even for press, right? People
Yeah.
are like, you just have a single out. Let's
Yeah,
wait till the album.
let's wait for
right?
the album.
Yeah.
So it's still about this album. And I gotta say, like, there's this really solid argument that an album is a total abstract concept based on how many songs could fit on a piece of vinyl.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is something magic about that number between 8 and 15, but with something to do with listener fatigue setting in after that.
Yeah.
And there's something about that number that does create, like, and that 45 to 60-minute number where you sort of sit down and absorb something all at once. So I don't know, man. I mean, I totally with you, but I think that collections, playlists,
Yeah.
let's say, but collections still are going to be a thing.
It's almost making a playlist for this
Yeah.
generation, right? So the new album, I Versus I. Let's talk
Yeah.
about it for a moment. You just released the video, Fluid. Any stories behind like the inspiration for the video? It's very cool. I watched it.
Yes.
It definitely has a cool,
Yeah.
interesting vibe to it.
So my baby mama, let me. Well, yeah, it's fine.
You have a 3-year-old, 4-year-old?
A 7-year-old.
Oh,
now.
7-year-old,
Fucking
okay.
time is flying.
I was watching stuff from years ago, so I didn't even
Yeah.
know. 7, okay. Amazing.
So I had a relationship where my girlfriend and I broke up, and she started dating women, and the fluidity with that was like, I was like, yeah, but I want to, like, how can I?
Be
But what
part of
about
this.
how can I also, like, you know what I mean? I'm down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll be part of this. Just let
I'm
me
down.
know,
I'm
right.
down. I'm fluid. So, but what I realized is, like, from a sort of a cheerleading standpoint, and approaching sort of the general notion of fluidity, because I remember I did this interview a long ass time ago with I'm a Robot, where they're like, it was with Out magazine actually. They're like, what do you consider yourself? And I've always been really reticent about categorization. Like,
Sure.
I always find it
Even with
boxed in.
music.
Even with music.
Yeah.
Even with I'm good with chromosomes, and then like after that I don't know, you know.
Right.
So I'm really into the the general concept with all of it, but I was thinking, how do you express that in a video? And one of my favorite videos has always been the Peter Gabriel Sledgehammer video.
Of course. Great video.
And I was thinking, well, for me, the future is going to have this eventuality of fluidity as we sort of enter this new age of, like, singularity, where we're sort of like transmogrifying and morphing at all points, and tables are turning into chairs, like when we tell them to, or whatever the hell is going to awaits us.
Yeah.
And what I realized, that there is a symbiosis between our biology, our actual biologies, and that eventuality. And I wanted to somehow sort of show that, like, cells splitting and dividing and changing, and nature and disintegration and regeneration and all of these things. And there's just such beautiful imagery when you look at, like, microscopic footage of stuff.
So it's
just
cells,
like-
actually. That's what it is. 'cause I
Yeah,
remember seeing-
cells
yeah.
and yeah.
And now that you reference Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer, I can totally see the references.
yeah.
And it's great. So it's interesting. So you have this record coming out. The next record's coming out, what, a few months later? It's because it's a double album?
Yeah,
so
we're
it's
gonna. That maybe is that might be enshrouded in secrecy.
Okay.
But it's gonna. I'm finishing it up now.
Cool. It's funny that you said that, because it's dare I say, you have this sort of like Messiah-like quality in Edward Sharpe, and so the idea of this communal aspect of Edward Sharpe, and even your current relationship that's you just referenced. So it's not that bizarre, that concept, because you have that persona, right?
Yeah.
So but taking that to this new record, is this mostly about the breakup? Is it about sort of
Yeah,
where
it's
the
my
relationship went?
personal shit. It's like, dude, I realized that by removing myself and being, like, sort of emotionally communal all the time, I sort of got used to not having to share my own personal feelings on certain things, my interpersonal relationship, depression. I sort of got used to the idea of, like, being above the fray. So when I suddenly was going through this breakup and the disintegration of this dream of the family unit and this whole thing, and I was experiencing like real depression and sadness and grief and talking to my kid about death and all these things, that if I really wanted to speak to this, I was going to have to actually speak to it. And that was a bit of a leap. I hadn't done that in a long-ass time.
So most of this is sort of interpersonal relationships.
Yeah.
And do you miss sort of being on the road now? Because I know you guys are going to record, but it's still going to be probably another year or so before you're out there doing this.
I don't miss it yet, but I think it's... I miss performing a little bit. Like, I really love performing, you know?
It's that 1 hour on stage,
It's that
right?
1 hour on stage.
Yeah.
You connect with people in a way that where else do you get to do that?
No question.
You know
Because
what I mean?
you did a gig at Coachella that I heard you talk about how you were nervous before you played.
Yeah.
And I always get nervous. And I remember, I guess if I'm going to name drop a little bit, I actually sat with Mick Jagger years ago, and he was saying how he got nervous, even now to this day before he performs.
yeah.
And I was like, you get nervous? You're Mick Jagger. How do you get nervous? He's like, yeah, I still, it happens to me. So
I mean, they say that's it, once you lose that, like that's
it, right?
That's
yeah.
it.
Because
Yeah.
you kind of go up there with Edward Sharpe. You would go up there without having a set list.
Yeah.
I remember seeing a gig recently where you just sort of got on stage. You would almost like call out in the audience,
Yeah.
what should we do?
Yeah.
Right? So was that sort of the idea, sort of the antithesis of whatever the norm would be for a band to get up there and have the set list every night?
Yeah, as part of the sort of unprofessionalizing professionalism.
Deconstructing. Yeah.
Making it still that 4th grade, 5th grade, like sing-along thing. Yeah.
Are you going to gig out with this new album that you have?
Yeah, I think it's inevitable. I'm going to have to. It's so fun. That thing at the Grammy Museum was amazing, and we're doing a Colbert thing.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Are you doing Fluid?
On Colbert?
Yeah.
No, I think we're going to do Stronger.
Okay.
But it's sort of a TBD thing because, yeah.
We'll be right back with Alex in a second.
You're listening to Lips LA with Scott Lips.
Hey, guys, we're back. So the record's actually out like today, right?
Yeah.
Cool. And it's 10 tracks?
14.
14. Amazing.
Yeah.
So the double record could conceivably be like 30 tracks or something.
Yes.
Probably hard for people to digest that much music right now these days.
I think it's a lot, probably.
Everyone's into the singles and whatnot.
Yeah.
So 2020, you got your studio in New Orleans,
Yeah.
right? Most of the music you're doing is there.
Yes, all of it.
Are you collaborating with people for this new album, or is it mostly stuff you do on your own?
I do a lot of it on my own, but there's some incredible musicians, New Orleans-based musicians. Bass player Donald Ramsey, who's just like a legend there, and Brad Walker, saxophone player, who's on that track we just heard, Fluid, and Donald Ramsey, both the bass and sax combo. I've used on a bunch of these songs.
Cool. It's a great album. I want to talk a little bit about your activism because you have a lot of causes that you're connected to. Let's talk about what's the one that's most near and dear to your heart, I guess, because there's like political stuff. You have a lot of different things that you have going on in that
I think
space.
the most important in some ways and dear to me is the work with the Big Sun Foundation, where we set up these community land trusts. And what that is, for anyone who doesn't know, we basically, a community land trust is a bunch of sort of properties. They don't have to necessarily be like, contiguous properties that all get put into a trust so that, for low-income housing or for, to obviate any like weird speculative real estate market gentrification stuff. So, like, for instance, our first project is in Detroit.
Because you bought a lot of land there, right?
Yeah, we have 40, I think we have 40 lots now.
Okay.
All in this area, and it's all really due to this woman, Shamaim Shu, Mama Shu, everyone calls her. And she was there, she had the first place, and then we started picking up properties next to her. She had this vision already. So the main thing, what I love about it, is going into a neighborhood and finding someone who already wants to do something for their neighborhood. They already have the vision of like creating low-income housing, creating shops for local artisans, and these are in places that are not like hi-fi places. This is like in the middle of Detroit.
Yeah, I went there. It was
total
a little
blight.
bit. Some parts were a little bit scary when I went there.
Yeah, I mean, an occupancy of like 700,000 people in a city built for $3.5 million.
Yeah.
So
Is that what you're doing with the land that you purchased?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So it'll go. You'll basically take that land, redevelop it.
Yeah, I mean schools. They don't have a high school. They don't have a. So we built something called the Homework House for kids, where they can come. We have a computer bank that Dell donated, and a bunch of people have donated for this thing. We're setting up basketball courts. I mean, this is a place that didn't even have a street light over this gigantic, like 12-foot crater in the middle of the street, and kids are just bicycling by it at night. There's so much that was missing from schools being closed and whatnot, to not having sort of like anywhere to eat. And now we have like vertical farming, all these sort of educational things. It's really about kids.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
I've seen some of the vertical farming stuff, and
Yeah.
it's pretty incredible. So that's great. And then obviously Bernie Sanders, a big
And
big
Bernie.
fan.
Yeah, Bernie.
Yeah. We
and,
can't not talk about that because
yeah.
you're a huge proponent of him. And
Yeah.
let's talk about like any thoughts coming up with everything
I
going
mean,
on
I'm
there?
just glad that
Seems like he's winning. in the
he's sort of
polls, so-
starting to win.
Yeah, which is
and
pretty cool.
and I just think it's so cool because for me, what I always understood being liberal to be about, or progressive to be about, is to be about the community, to be about sort of putting the community, not necessarily all the way before yourself, but you're a part of this community, and doing things with the public, sort of like with the communal interest in mind, has always been what like that was about to me. But then you have sort of corporate interests and all these things infiltrating, and have never really fundamentally made the Democratic Party really stay true to its word in that respect. And to see someone who's just brazenly and blatantly sort of about the idea of sharing and caring, I just love it, man. I love that he's sort of like this incorruptible force that at the very least, you know, not to put him on any kind of pedestal, but I can track his history. I go out in the streets and protest, and so does he.
Yeah.
He's actually out there. He was out there when he was a kid. He's out there then. He's talking about all the stuff we're talking about now 20, 30 years ago, and I love that.
It's amazing,
you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like hopefully good things coming up this year
Yeah.
for sure. So definitely stream I vs. I. Any other projects coming up this year? Because obviously there's so much you have going on.
Recording a new Edward Sharpe album.
Amazing. So that's going to be for this year,
Yeah.
coming out next year.
No, probably coming out this year.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Are you guys still on which label are you guys on now?
Community Music,
Okay,
our
cool.
own
Your
label.
own
The
label,
label
cool.
I started after Heath died. I was
Oh,
like,
amazing,
you know,
amazing.
yeah.
Cool. So, and obviously that'll come out, then hopefully you'll be touring next year?
Yes, we will
Okay.
almost certainly be doing some touring. Yeah.
And any like one-off gigs besides the Grammy Museum we
yeah,
should know
yeah.
about?
We got a one-off gig, Brian. Where's the? We got the
Oh,
Dominican
cool.
Republic, but can we announce the thing that's right now?
Shout out to Brian, who's in the corner.
Beach Life,
Beach Life?
Beach Life in Redondo Beach in May, right?
Is that a festival? Yeah. Amazing. Who else is on that festival, do you know?
Steve Miller Band.
Very cool.
And Sublime.
I like those eclectic
Right?
festivals. I always like the sort of the Bonnaroo, some of those really eclectic mixes of.
I love those gigs,
yeah,
dude.
they're
I mean,
like-
I love the hip festivals,
Yeah.
but like I love
Coachellas
the
and whatever.
like.
The eclectic ones.
I love the eclectic ones
Definitely.
too, because real music lovers
Yeah.
like go there, and it's not about the scene; it's about the
Definitely.
music.
There's that one in San Diego I always go to. I forget the name of it. It's in La Jolla. It's like that. I forget the name of it. It's always like you have like hip hop and 80s. It's like we'll think of this in 1 second. As soon as you leave, we'll think of it. But it's great.
Yeah.
So that's cool. So a lot of exciting stuff coming up. Check out Fluid. Download all the new music.
Yeah.
Make sure you. Well, actually, you
Is
can't.
there downloads now? Everybody's asking where do I download? I was
Stream
like,
it.
you can't,
Download
right?
it.
Oh, Bandcamp page will be up today.
Okay.
Yeah.
And follow you on social media.
And follow me on Alex_Ebert at Instagram.com or whatever.
I know that's probably your favorite thing to do, but at the end of the day, that's how you connect with people these days.
You know
right?
what? Same dude. Go to. Oh yeah. Actually, it's an interesting thing we put together. Like, we've tried to put together the whole story of me musically and creatively
Amazing.
at samedude.com with a 5AME.com. 5AME.com or 5AMEdude.com. 5AMEdude.
There's a lot of stuff to remember.
Yeah, and it's just like a list of all the stuff I've done, so it's kind of cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, man, it was a pleasure. We never got to hang before.
Thanks so
I'm
much.
sure we know like a lot of the same people.
Oh, I'll
so
say
it's
one
cool.
more thing.
Yeah.
I have an app that this podcast will be on.
Oh, amazing.
And it allows.
What's that called?
It's called Tuners.
Okay.
And it
I read
allows
about that, I think.
users to actually send voice memos back and forth and create threads about whatever they listen to.
Amazing.
So maybe people have questions about this thing and want to ask me something. So
Yeah.
this will be on Tuners. I'll be out there listening in case you have any questions.
You had about 500 million streams a home, so let's hope that some of those people will, I'm sure they'll tune in. So this was a pleasure, man. Come back anytime, and we'll talk about your next record when it comes out, the second one that we can't really talk about.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay,
All
awesome,
right,
bro.
cheers.
Good to have you.
You're listening to Lips LA with Scott Lips.